Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last and I think best of the Bookathon this weekend. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what your work is, and go from there. And I'm going to start with Toni Logan this evening. Toni, you're on.
Hi, my name's Toni Logan, and my work is Share the Moon. So it's a paranormal. But it's set in present day. So there was a murder mystery on the land. My novel, thank you, Share the Moon, which comes out in February. It's about three friends, Jamie, Kate, and Callie, who live together in an old Victorian house and overlooks a 50-acre vineyard. And there's also a ghost that lives on the land, and she was murdered in the early 1900s, who is also the other main character. So the setup for what I'm about to read is that Callie is upstairs using her vibrator while Jamie and Kate are downstairs drinking wine and eating cheese while watching a crime show on TV. But the electricity in the house is a little wonky. So when Callie uses her vibrator, it shorts out the TV. So I'm going to start the read after she's done, and she's on her way down to join the other two for cheese and wine. The sound of Callie bounding down the stairs made Jamie look over her shoulder, but he was in the lead, his sagging stomach swaying as he waddled down each step. Seconds later, he was on top of the coffee table, checking out the food. "Oh, no, you don't." Kate grabbed him and a slice of cheese and put both on the floor. Callie walked to the couch, threw her legs over the back, and rode the cushion down to the seat. She snatched the empty glass, grabbed a bottle of wine, and poured. Kate started clapping slowly. "I'm impressed. Record time tonight." "Seriously," Jamie frowned, "you're encouraging this?" She turned to Callie. "The next time you feel the need to get off, could you please check with us first? You know the wiring in this house is worse since the last storm, and every time you use your vibrator, it messes with the TV." "Maybe it wasn't me. Maybe Charlie's messing with the TV." Callie chuckled as she downed a glass of wine in 3 gulps and poured another. "Nah," Kate said. "Charlie just haunts the vineyard. Never seen him lurking around the house." "See," Jamie pointed to Callie, "don't you be putting this on Charlie." Charlie was the name given to the resident ghost of the vineyard. Sightings of the boyish figure walking around, keeping to himself and doing nothing in particular were daily occurrences. But on the evenings of a full moon, he would sit at the far east side of the corner of the land, arms wrapped around his bent knees, rocking back and forth. No one knew why the moon seemed to bring out this unusual behavior. Charlie was a ghost, and ghosts, like everyone else, apparently did weird things. A cracker flew with skilled accuracy across the couch and beamed Jamie in the middle of her forehead as thoughts of Charlie faded from her mind. "Ouch," Jamie rubbed the spot where the cracker hit. "Have you been in Kate's pot?" Callie folded her arms in an accusatory posture. "What? No, why would you say that? You were totally spacing out. If you're not stoned, let's hope this isn't some early onset thing you've got going on." "I was thinking of Charlie," Jamie chuckled as she stood up and arched her back. "And on that note, I think I'm going to take my ass and my glass outside and enjoy the beautiful evening." Jamie grabbed the wine bottle. "Anyone want some more?" Callie and Kate shook their heads. "All right, then." She looked around. "Anyone see the cork?" "Uh-oh," Kate pointed to what was left of a completely chewed cork next to slobbery pieces of half-eaten cheese. "I've got this." Callie jumped up and motioned for the bottle. She walked over to her backpack, pulled out a tampon, and pushed the extra absorbent end in the neck of the bottle. Jamie scrunched her face in disgust. "Okay, wow. Now I'm never going to unsee that." "What? It makes the perfect cork. And see?" Callie grabbed a string. "It even comes with a built-in uncorking device." "That's disgusting." Jamie rolled her eyes as she walked towards the screen door. "I'll be on the porch if anyone needs me." The door squeaked in rusty protest as Jamie pushed it open. She walked to the old wooden bench, plopped down, leaned back, and stared at the full moon. She finished her glass, placed it on the floor, and allowed the fatigue of another long day to carry her into a peaceful sleep. "I know you're not reading because the TV's messing up again." Kate's loud words traveled onto the porch, waking Jamie. She yawned and slowly opened her eyes. "Holy shit!" Her foot caught on the bench as she jumped up and fell hard. Her heart was racing and a moment of fear gripped her as she tried to focus. "Charlie?" She cocked her head at the familiar figure sitting on the bench, smiling. "Well, actually, my name's Ruth." Jamie scanned Ruth. Up until this moment, she had assumed, like everyone else, that their vineyard ghost was a teenage boy, an easy assumption to make based on Ruth's short hair and men's attire. But up close, Jamie could clearly see the woman under the guise. Jamie stared at Ruth's flawless, lifelike complexion, shy smile, and sparkling, crystal gray eyes that held Jamie in a trance. Ruth looked so real, so alive, so gorgeous. The rusty squeak of the screen door startled Jamie. She looked over her shoulder as Kate peeked out from behind the door. Girl, what the hell are you doing on the floor? I'm talking to. Jamie gestured towards the bench, but Ruth had vanished. Never mind, she mumbled, lost in thought as she stared at the bench. You sure you haven't been in my stash? Kate raised an eyebrow as she stepped onto the porch. No, Kate, I haven't been into your pot. I tripped getting off the bench, that's all. Jamie cocked her head. Why? What's up? Callie's upstairs messing with herself again, and it ruined the big reveal of who the killer was on the show. I swear that girl's not normal. Anyway, I figured while she's up there doing her thing, I'd come out and sit with you if that's okay. Kate frowned, but I ain't sitting on the floor. Jamie waved Kate over and motioned for help. Kate heaved her up, and the two of them shuffled to the bench. Jamie froze as Kate sat in the exact spot that Ruth had been sitting just moments ago. What's the matter? Did I sit in pigeon shit again? Kate cocked her left hip. What? No, Jamie said as she plopped down next to her. You didn't sit in anything. Well, then stop acting so weird, Kate said as she wrapped an arm around her. Beautiful night, huh? Man, I sure hope this place makes it, Jamie said as she stared into the darkness of the vineyard as an image of Ruth flashed in her head. Kate patted her shoulder. It will, darling. It's made it this far.
Well, I have to say, I don't think I've ever read a case where the vibrator has made the electricity blink on and off. And I can honestly say I have never thought about using a tampon as a cork before.
Two things you gotta know.
I've learned something new today, and I hope you all have learned something new too. I'm not quite sure how if I would be really willing to do the latter, but that's an interesting concept. This is kind of like the point where you say, do you write what you know, or do you just write what comes to your mind? But
it was more what came to my mind.
That's good. I was going to say you don't have to answer that question.
The safe route.
There you go. Okay. Okay, let's, thank you, Toni, that was great. Let's move on to, I'll have to ask some questions for you a little bit later if we have some time. So let's move on to Renee. You've got a great book coming out, Renee. Let me get my notes here. You've got 6 books currently through Bold Strokes, and your latest one is Body Language, right?
My latest one is Bonded Love.
Oh, Bonded Love. Okay, got it.
And the one coming out is Body Language.
Got it. And that one comes out when? In February?
February 1st with Bold Strokes.
Okay, great. All right. And which one are you going to be reading from, Renee?
Body Language.
Okay.
So Body Language is an erotic romance featuring Micah James, a waiter at a fine dining restaurant where she meets wealthy women and puts her sexual skills on a private menu, and Jennifer Long, a college professor of English literature who also tutors one-on-one when she's not in a lecture hall. Tonight's selection takes place shortly before they meet face-to-face. How were your holidays? Karen Danker, Jen's coworker and best friend, asked. The usual with Mom. It was great seeing the kids, though. They always remind me what Christmas is all about. What about yours? Funny and crazy busy. I'm glad to be back, though. She let out a sigh of relief. Me too. She spent most of her time off reading and shopping online because she didn't want to be out bundled up and looking larger than she already did. I've got a few spring semester students coming in. Any promising stars, Jen asked. Maybe, Karen said. One has baseline GRE scores, but she's older than the average student. She's probably decided on a career change, so likely more focused. Let me know if you need anything, Jen said, always willing to help out. How about dinner tonight? I could use some intellectual conversation. She chuckled. Dinner sounds good. Mexican or Thai? Karen asked. Calorie counts flashed in front of her. Mexican, she said, as her mother's voice played on repeat in her head. See you at 6:30, Los Amigos? Sure, it's always good there. She hung up and made an entry in her phone calendar. Jen's first class of the new year wasn't until tomorrow, but she made a point of being accessible to her students by coming to the office even when she didn't have lectures. Bright sun streamed through the window, and the dusting of snow on the ground reflected like diamonds scattered on the breeze. She pulled on her coat and scarf to take a walk. The air was brisk, but in the absence of a cold wind, the fresh scent encouraged her to take advantage of the sunshine. The library was always a good destination, and she turned toward the huge beige brick building with the sculpture of a world globe in front. Jen had begun research for a paper regarding the influence of technology on language and the arts. With the lack of personal interactions, the less creative the current generation had become. Thankfully, literature was still going strong, even if the majority of reading was now done on electronic devices. She still preferred holding the paper version. As she cruised the periodicals, her phone vibrated in her pocket. The screen displayed a meme of a mother pulling out her hair from her sister, Carly, and she laughed before remembering where she was. Looking up, her gaze landed on the last person in a row of tables. The woman sat with headphones on, an open textbook in front of her, and a pencil drumming lightly on the blank page of her notebook. Shoulder-length wavy brown hair accentuated her androgynous features, and the sharply tailored shirt was an obvious giveaway she was likely an instructor, one she'd not had the pleasure of meeting yet. She appeared a bit younger than Jen, and exactly the kind of woman she would like to get to know better, if she were dating. The kind of woman she often pictured when she was in bed alone at night, but one who would never be interested in someone who looked like she did. Not in real life. Her face heated and she turned away, too embarrassed to get any closer. She couldn't stay any longer, not with the woman of her fantasies so close. When she got home, she curled up in the corner of her couch to read, all the while thinking about the woman she'd turned from. Her sister told her she needed to be braver and make more friends, but making friends with women had never been easy. Every time Jen thought about introducing herself, the old taunts and hurtful words roared in her ears, words she'd never expected to hear from the person she'd been dating for months. She gave up trying to concentrate and tossed the magazine aside. It was almost time to meet Karen. Jen picked out a gray sweater with white starbursts and a dark gray pair of jeans. She took pride in her clothing choices, even if she purposely picked colors and styles to cover her figure. It's not like there was anyone to try to impress. Micah rubbed her hands on her pants. Christ, it felt just like undergrad school all over again when she'd barely managed to squeak out her associate's degree. Maybe returning to college had been a mistake. She still worried about the what-ifs, like being laid off from the restaurant. But her brother Rob had reassured her it was just her head playing with her. She needed to stop being pessimistic. Hearing her name made her focus. Micah James, the professor of her anatomy course, made eye contact. She raised her hand, and Professor Danker moved on. She'd foolishly signed up for 3 courses, 2 this spring and 1 during the summer when the restaurant business soared with vacationers. The one she was sitting in at the moment and trying so hard to remain calm in during roll call, Anatomy 101, would set the tone for the rest of the work ahead of her. Her brother had faith in her. All she had to do was have faith in herself. Jen had been trying her damnedest to follow her doctor's advice by eating healthy and exercising. Everything she needed to make a Caesar salad was there, but she was tired of eating like a rabbit. She pulled on jeans and a V-neck sweater, then chose her favorite vest, the one that didn't make her look like the Michelin Man. She bent down beside Brooks. "Be a good boy. Mama's going for a treat." He barked as she stood. She'd inadvertently said the magic word. Brooks wasn't the only one who deserved a treat every now and then. After a short wait, Jen was seated at an intimate table for two and wished there was someone across from her, someone she could have a conversation with that didn't have to do with why she felt so guilty being there. She glanced around at the tasteful decor, glad they hadn't taken down their decorations of red and green, with the twinkling lights sparkling on the walls. Halfway around the room, she did a double take. The woman from the library sat at a table by herself. A waitress stopped by and placed a pizza in the empty space across from her, bending low and smiling seductively. The return smile appeared genuine, yet Jen sensed reservation. Even though the striking woman hadn't noticed her, Jen's face heated. The waitress was obviously flirting. It was bold, something Jen would never do. Not that she wouldn't like to trade places with her to be that close to the attractive professor. Common courtesy would dictate she introduced herself and asked the woman to join her, but she couldn't move. As her meal arrived, she hoped she could avoid meeting her gaze, convinced she'd just make a fool of herself in light of her attraction. It's what always happened.
Excellent. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
I, as I was preparing for this, I wanted to read, a little bit about what each author had written, and I got your opening line in this book is unbelievable. And so if anybody, when you pre-order it and when you get it, the opening line is supposed to be a real grabber to get people into the book, and it absolutely is that. I'm not gonna, no spoiler alert, so I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but it's like, okay, that got my attention right now. So great. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on to Missouri. You are up next. Are you going to be Missouri today, or are you going to be Paige reading today?
Missouri.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what you're going to be reading from.
Thank you for the intro. This is a book that just came out January 1st. It's called The Mandolin Lunch. It's about, there's three main characters in this book. Garrett, who's a children's book illustrator, Tess, who's a music teacher and a musician. And the two of them have found themselves sharing a classroom together for a short period. And then Tess's 6-year-old daughter, June, who doesn't get a point of view in the story, but is definitely a main character in the story. So I'm going to read from a section a little bit further back in the book. And this is sort of the middle of the night after their first real date, the first real date between Garrett and Tess. Tess woke feeling too warm and thirsty, and for a split second, confused by her surroundings. The room was dark. She was unsure of the time. Garrett was asleep beside her. Her stomach did a somersault at the sight of Garrett's bare shoulder and back exposed above the covering. Garrett was on her side, facing away from Tess. They'd made love. She'd had sex with Garrett. Breathe. Just breathe. June was with her grandmother. She and Garrett were adults, and everything was fine. Everything is fine. She formed the thought a second time to convince herself, having no other confirmation that this was actually the case. Tess sat up and swept her fingers through her hair. She'd fallen asleep, naked, in Garrett's arms. A very pleasant position to be in, but then the far too familiar sense of guilt crept into her thoughts. She'd left June with her grandmother to have sex with Garrett. Had her subconscious known all along that this was her agenda? Tess quietly left the bed and searched in the dark for clothing. Garrett's discarded flannel shirt seemed the coziest choice. She partially buttoned it and walked to the kitchen. The shirt was obviously a favorite of Garrett's. The fabric had been washed and worn to point of ultimate softness. Luckily, a lamp in the living room had been left on, so she wasn't searching for a light switch in utter darkness. She checked for something cold and discovered a bottle of sparkling water. She was about to drink directly from the bottle, but stopped herself. Had she regressed to college dorm life after one romp in bed? She took a glass from the dish drainer near the sink and filled it. She leaned against the counter's edge and sipped. She realized that Garrett had drawings and sketches strewn all over the adjacent countertop. Curiosity got the better of her, and she rounded the island to take a closer look. There were rough character sketches and other type pages with story notes. Taped to the slant board was a heavier illustration board with the beginnings of a finished ink drawing. This was like getting a glimpse behind the wizard's green velvet curtain to witness the magic firsthand. After a few more minutes, she returned to bed. She tried to slip under the covers as stealthily as possible, but Garrett stirred, rolling over onto her back, rubbing her eyes. What time is it? Garrett covered a yawn with her hand. I'm not sure. Late, I think. Garrett's small breasts and her long torso were on full display as moonlight cut a swath across where she lay. Tess tried not to stare. I was thirsty, so I got up and served myself. I hope you don't mind. Garrett reached for the glass and took a few sips. Thanks. Tess set the nearly empty glass on the bedside table and snuggled down next to Garrett. Garrett's arm was beneath her head with her forearm traced across Tess's shoulder. Tess held Garrett's hand in hers, entwining their fingers. I hope you won't judge me because I'm not the sort of woman who usually has sex on a first date. Garrett grinned and rotated to kiss her temple. Well, first off, the judge's score is in, and you ranked very high. Tess swatted at Garrett, landing a soft blow to her leg beneath the blanket. And secondly, I don't think this was a first date. Oh, really? Tess wasn't so sure. By my count, this is like our fourth date. Not that I question your math, but I'd like to hear exactly how you came up with that number. Tess released Garrett's hand and rolled onto her side, draping her arm across Garrett's midsection. Well, twice we had dinner at your house to watch the movie. That's 2. And then the hot chocolate day. That's 3. Oh, I forgot to give your jeans back. Tess had been so distracted by picnic preparations that she'd neglected to bring them along. And tonight makes 4. Garrett sounded very satisfied with her reasoning. I'm feeling better already. She squeezed Garrett lightly. Okay, well, just so we're clear, I'm also not the sort of woman who has sex on a fourth date either. Garrett laughed, a genuine laugh, the kind of laugh that warmed the room, the kind of laugh that she knew could chase away shadows and lift your heart when you really needed to be lifted. They lay quietly for a few moments. Garrett stroked her hair softly, and she rested her palm at the center of Garrett's chest. I couldn't help noticing your drawings in the kitchen. They're really beautiful. Thank you. How do you write your stories? Garrett didn't answer right away. I've always believed that stories were found rather than written. Well, I'm not sure you can tell such great stories without feeling much more than you reveal, Garrett Allen. Tess was moved by Garrett's modesty, but knew that there was a depth to Garrett that she hadn't quite reached. That would likely take more than 4 dates. Garrett started. Oh, I just realized how late it is. You probably need to get home to June. June is staying all night with her grandmother. Tess found Garrett's concern endearing, but misplaced. If June were at home, I'd have left hours ago. Oh yeah, right. Garrett relaxed again. She actually won't be home until early afternoon because we're playing at the cafe tomorrow. Wow, is it the 3rd Sunday already? Yes, Tess raised up on one elbow so that she could see Garrett's face. Will you come and listen to our band play? Absolutely, Garrett kissed her. Tess sank back to Garrett's shoulder. After a little while, the slow rise and fall of Garrett's chest told Tess that she was asleep. Tess's body fairly tingled, despite her effort to relax. She knew sleep would elude her. This was all too real and too scary. This might be more than she had expected to feel about someone she barely knew.
Very nice. Thank you, Missouri. So, and you said the title of that book is The Mandolin Lunch. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
How did you get the title for this book?
My wife and I were having dinner with some friends of ours a long time ago, and we were asking them about, we were sharing our how we met stories. And my friend is a musician in a band called Blame Sally. I don't know if if anybody knows the music. They're a Bay Area band. They're very good. Anyway, she plays the mandolin, and they were talking about how they met, and I started calling the event in which they met the mandolin lunch. And then I was like, hey, that's a great title. Can I steal it? So actually this book is dedicated to Renee and Karen, as a way of saying thanks for letting me steal their meet cute for the title of my book.
Mm-hmm. So did you write the book from the title, or were you already working on the book and just needed a title? Because I see some similarities between that story, your life as an illustrator, and the book.
Yeah, no, I was the title really inspired the book. And then, I mean, I don't know anything about mandolins, so I had to talk to Renee quite a bit about not only what it's like to play a mandolin, which is a very finicky instrument, but also what it's like to perform and to play music for an audience, and that relationship you have with the audience. I mean, I obviously work as an illustrator, so I knew how to write that part of the story, but I needed to talk to her, and also my wife, who's a musician, just about what that feels like. I don't know if you ever if you have a friend who's a musician and you see them play, and then you see how that changes their persona when they play music. I don't know if you've ever noticed that about people, but anyway.
Okay,
it's different for everybody who performs, but
good. And the research is what's so key to making it a real story. It absolutely brings it to life.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities between art and music, and that was one of the that was fun for me to write in the story. Right, some people. I mean, a painting is almost like a symphony, right? With layered music, or music could almost be like a painting, and that you're creating textures. I mean, so there's some interesting overlap as these two characters talk to each other and learn to understand each other about each of their artistic pursuits.
Yeah, I see the connection for sure. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Missouri. Suzie, you are up
Thank
next.
You, Julie.
Suzie, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suzie Clarke. I write action adventure with some romance. This is the book that is currently out is Shadows of Steel. It is the second book in the series, the Shadow series. And what I'm going to read for you today, the story obviously is a continuation of Rachel and Claire and the things that they've gone through. What I'm going to read today is a little excerpt, a couple different parts of it. Part of it is they are in London. Rachel and Claire are in London. Rachel is on assignment with MI6. And I'm going to read a little bit about them. And then I'm going to read a little bit about what happens to Rachel when she goes into her assignment. So I'll start from there. Rachel ended the call, then turned over and looked at Claire, who was wide awake, staring at her, an expression of pure panic on her face. I have to go to Manila with Bryce. It's time for you to go home like we agreed. Pack your bags. They'll be here in a little while to pick you up. Claire grabbed her and held on. Please don't go. Lie to them if you have to, but don't go. Rachel gently placed her hands on her arms. I'll be all right. There's a team going with us. They got up and dressed in silence. Claire walked over and wrapped her arms around her again. Rachel stroked her hair. Don't worry, I'll be with you at Tilly's as soon as I can. It's going to be okay, I promise. You can't promise shit, you know it. She put her arms around Claire's waist, bringing her closer. Claire, don't. I've made a commitment and I have to do this. She touched her face and looked into her eyes that were now spilling over with tears. I won't be able to call you until I get back here to London. There was a deafening silence between them. Like no one else in the world existed at that moment, and everything had suddenly stopped. There were no traffic sounds, no barking dogs, no noises from the other apartments. Claire broke away from her and walked over to her side of the bed, picked the book up off the nightstand and threw it across the room, slamming it into the wall. Rachel placed her hands on Claire's shoulders. Doing that won't change anything. At that moment, she felt the full force of the dread and anxiety of leaving Claire. Her mind filled with apprehension, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't want to tell her anymore because it would make the situation worse. And she couldn't tell her because it was classified. 2 operatives were already dead, and she knew she could be the next one. Bryce's aide took Rachel's leather carry bag and left for the car. She turned to Claire and held her, whispering in her ear, "I'll be with you in just a few days, I promise." She kissed her and forced herself to break her embrace. "Damn it, Rachel, you better keep your promise." Claire's words echoed in her ears as she slid hesitantly into the back seat of the Range Rover with the heavily tinted windows. I'm going to read one other different scene now. 2 things you must always remember here in Manila, Rachel. There's always someone watching and anyone can be bought. Bryce said it as if he'd spoken a written law of the land. The small shanty-like structures that lined the dark, narrow streets were jammed together haphazardly, beside and on top of each other, seemingly with no uniform construction design, but each looked critical to the support and existence of the others. When they reached the Manila Hotel near the old city wall, she showered and changed clothes, lying down on the bed for what seemed like only a few minutes before she was taken back down to the vehicle. Rachel was surprised there was traffic in the middle of the night. The driver drove to the back of the Asian Mall and around the corner to a small cream and green colored older building. They got out of the Range Rover and climbed the uneven concrete stairs to the 2nd floor, then walked down the open hallway to a room on the south side of the building. 2 agents positioned themselves to stand guard outside the door. "All right, Rachel, let's begin," said Bryce. She crouched down in the dimly lit corner of the dilapidated concrete building, her fingers flying across the lit keyboard as she entered the codes, sweat running down her face, dripping into her eyes. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and continued, her blouse soaked from the Manila heat and stifling humidity. "Start timing us as soon as I give you the signal, Bryce." "Now," she said. The data flashed onto the screen as she began to download the information, but the data suddenly started to corrupt. "They're fast. They're on us already, Bryce. We have to go." She yanked the cords from the booster and began shutting down the system, but it was too late. She knew whoever was at the other end had already tracked the origin of the signal. "We have to move now," she said, grabbing the flash drive and forcing it into her pants pocket. She disconnected her computer and shoved it and the booster into the black bag. "Now," she said again, hearing the anxiety in her own voice. She followed close behind Bryce, her heart racing, feeling the sweat drip down the sides of her face, the overwhelming stench of mildew and mold invading the heavy air as she struggled to breathe. She put one hand on Bryce to balance herself as they went down the narrow steps across, almost 2 at a time. Once they reached the bottom step and moved out into the shadows of the night, she felt herself being guided into the black Range Rover. The tires squealed on the pavement when the driver hit the main road, increasing his speed as the 2 black Cadillac Escalades approaching from the side and behind them raced across the parking lot to cut the distance between them.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Suzie. So I was in I listened to one of the earlier things today, and it was in an author chat, and I understand that you were a public health nurse at one time.
Health commissioner, yes.
Health commissioner.
Not a county health commissioner here. In
County health commissioner. Okay, got it. So how did you get started writing, just out of curiosity?
Well, I've written for a long time, off and on, since I was young. But because of my career that I chose, and of course with a family and the things that I was doing, I just did not have time to write. So when I retired as a health commissioner, I determined, actually I retired for that reason, so that I could start writing, and felt I just couldn't put it off anymore. So.
Excellent. I'm sure those of us that are still working in writing would love to be in a position to be able to just.
I appreciate it, because it's so difficult to do that when you work.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, you all have done a fabulous job. I'm sure, you know, the books are selling off the shelf based on your readings. So I will wrap us up with the readings, and then we have some time for some Q&A. I'm going to read from The Last First Kiss, and it came out, it's out this month, as a matter of fact. So it's set at a lesbian resort in a tropical island. How can you get much better than that? All kinds of lesbians in scantily clad. I mean, you can't get much better than that. One of my main characters, her name is Matt. Her name is Mattingly, but she's Matt. She is the widow of the first out lesbian Medal of Honor winner. And what goes with that is all of the pressures that she's getting from the Army, the Medal of Honor committee, her in-laws, that sort of thing. And she has a 9-year-old son, and her wife has been dead about 7 years or so. So she's off on a vacation that her friends gave her, and to this tropical island. I wish I had friends like that. To have just a good time, just to rest and relax. The other character is Kelly. She has just broken up with her girlfriend. She is not at all devastated by it or even upset by it. And when I do the reading, you'll find out a little bit why. And so they are going to read their first conversation. They saw each other on the plane. They didn't know obviously where they were, but they saw each other on the plane for the first time, and there were sparks that flew, but they went their separate ways, or at least they did, until they see each other here on the beach. Kelly had stalled long enough. She'd been in the water too long and felt her skin getting pink. She'd been ready to get out a while ago when she noticed the woman from the plane sitting in the chair right next to hers. Why was she hesitating? It wasn't like her to shy away from something uncomfortable or someone so beautiful. She'd sensed the attraction between them, and for crying out loud, she was single. She couldn't just go back to her room because her key was in her bag tucked under her chair. She wondered again about the woman's relationship status, as she was obviously alone on the beach. Kelly managed to get to her chair and reach for her book before the woman noticed her. She couldn't see her she couldn't see her eyes. They were behind wraparound sunglasses, but she felt the woman's eyes glide over her as before she broke into a dazzling smile. Do you come here often? The woman asked, sliding her sunglasses down her nose. Her blue eyes were more vivid than the first time she saw them, the color of the cloudless sky overhead. Kelly couldn't help but laugh. Does that line usually work for you? Actually, I'm a little out of practice, she admitted, blushing a little. Kelly's antenna extended. Is that because you're married? The woman didn't look away. No. Long-term girlfriend? No. Are you going to tell me that you never have to make the first move? That attitude would be really disappointing. No, that attitude would make me a conceited asshole, wouldn't it? Kelly tilted her head and raised her eyebrows questioningly. Widow, the woman said. Ooh, I'm sorry for your loss. Kelly had said that same phrase before to other people, and it sounded so trite, but what else was there? You had to say something. Thank you. I didn't mean to. The woman waved off Kelly's apology for her flippant bantering. How could she have known? No worries, she said. It's been a long time. She extended her hand. Matt Parker. Kelly wiped her damp palm on her towel before shaking hers. Kelly Newsom. A much prettier name than 6B. 6B? Your seat on the flight from Atlanta to Miami. Oh, yeah, right, Kelly said. Warmth spread through her that Matt had remembered her. And you were the woman on the plane. Kelly watched Matt's eyes light up, like she suspected hers did. Just the woman? Well, if I tell you it was the really hot woman on the plane, would that make your head so big you'd block my sun? I came to get a tan, you know. Matt laughed, again a hearty laugh that made Kelly's stomach tingle. I'll try to keep control over myself. Matt's eyes skimmed over her body again, and the tan you have looks great. Kelly warmed all over, glad she'd gone ahead and bought a new red bikini and chosen to wear it today. At the risk of ending our interesting conversation, it appears that you're here by yourself. And you were by yourself on the plane. You're not saving a chair for anyone here. Are you alone? Due to circumstances that will not ruin my day, it's just me, Kelly replied. I'll pose that question right back at you. My friends said I needed to get away, so they gave me this trip. Wow, Kelly said, squeezing some sunscreen into her palm. Do they need any more friends? I'll dump mine in a heartbeat and go with yours. She watched Matt's eyes follow her hands as she spread the lotion over her legs, and more than just her legs were heating up. And you can probably ask them later. They're here with me. They were still asleep when I left this morning. Matt, that's an interesting name. Short for something? Kelly asked, her voice a little raspy, because she was trying to banish the image of Matt lazing in bed. Mattingly, old family name, lucky me, she replied sarcastically. Well, in the 3 minutes I've known you, I can say it suits you. Well, I appreciate that, but it's caused me more confusion than any could should have to endure. Kelly thought for a moment, imagining boys and girls being separated by name. Matt was probably always in the wrong line. I see your point, she said. I'm going to be nosy and ask why you're on a beautiful beach by yourself. If none of your friends wanted to come, then you should dump them. Well, I was bringing my girlfriend, but when she decided she'd rather fuck my best friend than be here with me, I rescinded my offer. Ouch, Matt said, grimacing. Surprisingly, I'm not broken up over it. Kelly had realized that was true while driving to the airport. I traded her ticket for one in first class. I already had the time off. The room was paid for, so here I am, sitting next to the hot woman from the plane on my first day. She lay back in her chair, her legs outstretched, and caught Matt looking at her breasts again. She put her sunglasses on, but not before saying, "Don't run off." Kelly's phone ringing interrupted any further conversation. She glanced at it and swore. Work? Matt asked. Kelly frowned. X. Girlfriend or best friend? Best friend, Kelly replied, hitting the bright red hang-up icon. She turned off the ringer and put her phone face down on the table between them. Right now, it's neck and neck as to who's left the longest voicemail. Have you spoken to either one of them? Matt asked. Not sure why, but curious nonetheless. No, I have nothing to say to them now or ever, but the gist of their long, expansive message is basically that it was not what it looked like. Kelly turned and faced Matt, sliding her sunglasses down her nose to look at her. Can I ask you something? Sure, Matt answered, curious to where Kelly would take the conversation, but surprisingly eager to go anywhere with her. If you walked into your bedroom and saw your best friend fucking your girlfriend, what would you think it was? Yikes. Not much interpretation in that case. Matt regained her breath and tried to keep her eyes on Kelly's, but the lure of cleavage at the top of Kelly's bikini top was just too tempting. Matt's gaze dropped for a second, and when it returned, the knowing look on Kelly's face made Matt blush. Thank you, Kelly said. Any girl in my situation likes to know they're still attractive. Matt's heart rate spiked. That's definitely not a problem. Well, obviously Suzanne didn't think so. Well, obviously Suzanne's an idiot, Matt said. Other than what you must have gone through, I'm glad you're here. Kelly studied her for so long, Matt started to get nervous. Shit, I'm sorry. Here you are, a woman who'd been planning a romantic getaway with her girlfriend and recently found out said girlfriend was cheating on her with her best friend, and I'm hitting on you. That's just not cool, Matt said apologetically. Kelly smiled, and Matt's heart skipped again. Actually, Kelly said, just before sliding her sunglasses back up her nose and settling back in her chair, it is. Okay, so Any questions from anyone? Go ahead and put those back in the Q&A section. Everybody can turn their cameras back on. And I think one of the questions I have, so Toni, I have found out recently that you live in my home state of Arizona. Where do you live? Do you live in Phoenix or Tucson or some small town, or where exactly do you live? Are you're probably my next door, my neighbor down the street, maybe.
Scottsdale.
Scottsdale. Okay, I'm in North Phoenix. We'll have to, once this pandemic goes away, maybe we can chat sometime over a nice big cup of coffee. So that would be great. So Share the Moon, I'll stick with you, Toni, right now. Share the Moon is your first book with Bold Strokes?
Yes, it is.
Is it your first published work?
Yes, it is.
And how did you feel when you got that phone call or email from Rad or Sandy? How did you feel?
Okay, so I had worked a really long day and I was heading to the mailbox. And as you know, in the Phoenix area, you walk to a multiplex of mailboxes. So I'm walking and I'm really tired and I'm scrolling through my phone and I see the email and it was from Rad. And I'm reading it, and I'm walking, and now I'm like walking really fast. And by the time I got to the mailbox, I was like, are you kidding me? Oh my God. So, you know, of course, call the friends and stuff like that. And I'm like, you can't believe what just happened. So it was wonderful. It was just wonderful. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Suzie, how about you? How did you react?
Well, let's see. I just kind of jumped like Toni. I jumped up and down. I did what's called my happy dance, which is not a pretty sight. I have a tradition now, since this is going to be my fourth book coming up. I have a tradition to put on my favorite music and do my happy dance, which is a kind of a cross between a chicken dance and Elaine's dance on Seinfeld, which is not a pretty thing, but it gets it done. I turn it up as loud as I can and I dance.
Good. And Missouri, you're published before. I mean, you've published a lot of books, and you know, you're a cartoonist by trade. Is that how you would phrase it? Label it a cartoonist? Is that okay? So how did you get into starting, you know, lesbian fiction versus being a cartoonist?
Well, I think I've told this story on a panel before, so forgive me if you've heard this story before, but I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to turn into graphic novels, but not enough time to do that. And I thought, you know, maybe I should try to just write a prose book that's not illustrated and use some of these ideas that I didn't have time to illustrate. But it's, you know, fiction, because in a comic, anyone in a graphic novel gets a point of view. So you can have 20 points of view, right? But in a narrative, like what we're doing, you only get 1 or 2 points of view, maybe 3. But so it's a different storytelling challenge. But yeah, and Mandolin Lunch, I was kind of surprised. I worked with somebody on social media stuff, and she said, you know, this is your 18th book with Bold Strokes. And I was like, what? No. So it's been a very, very exciting and fun journey. Some of those are short stories, but still, yeah, it's like more than I realized.
And each time the box of books shows up on your front door.
So I guess I had a lot of ideas in that little soup. It's like the best day ever, every time.
Yeah. Every time that box of books shows up, it's the best day ever. Yeah. So Renee, this body language features a larger woman, not you know, 5'10", 135 pounds. I think I said that in some other session. What?
She's a real woman.
She's a real woman. So what made you decide to write a real woman?
As someone who's struggled with body image my entire life, it seemed like it was time to explore that in a more literary, creative way. And I'm sure that there are a lot of women out there who at some point, no matter what their body type, has struggled with their attraction level. And will I ever be looked at in that way? Or will I ever be desired in that way? As you see in so many movies and novels today. And I think sometimes writing real can be just as exciting and interesting as writing fiction. So it was kind of a combination. I didn't have the same experiences as Jen and Micah, but I certainly can empathize with a lot of what she was feeling.
Great, yeah. She's a real woman.
She is a real woman.
Okay, we are a couple of minutes over, but I want to give each of you a time, just a chance to talk about what's coming out next. And Renee, we'll just stick with you. So what do you have in the works?
After Body Language, I'll be published my 7th book. Is that right? My goodness, I've lost track. But Hot Days and Heated Nights, which is a romance that kind of rides the edge of an erotic romance, and it's between two masculine of center characters.
And when will that be out?
I want to say July of 2021. Okay.
Well, maybe that will go very good with mine, which is Summer Loving, and stories of fun in the sun with 3 different women, One Forgettable Summer. They'll be out in June, and it's 3 shorter stories of 3 individual characters. And so maybe it ties right into the warm days and hot nights.
Hot days and heated nights.
Hot days and heated nights. Same thing. Okay. And Missouri, how about you?
I'm working on a book. The sort of working title right now is Forever's Promise. I don't know if that's where it's going to end up. I don't have a release date for it yet. I've kind of been talking to Sandy about it on the side, but it's about a wildland firefighter who has a very traumatic experience. I had originally planned to write something else, but then with all the ferocious, I mean, we had such a horrible fire season last year, and I had so many friends that had, experiences with that. And my wife and I actually got trapped on I-80 when they closed it for the fire that tore through Vacaville. So I felt like, I sort of need to talk about this and write about it, and maybe share some of the stories that I've heard from friends and firefighters here. So, that's what I'm working on.
That would be great. Can't wait. Toni, how about you?
So Share the Moon comes out next month, February. And then I'm working on edits for The Marriage Masquerade, which comes out in August. And it's a marriage of convenience between 2 friends. And in order to get a B&B in Maui, the one person has to be married at the time that she acquires her deed. So her and her friend kind of do this little scheme, and friends to lovers. So it turns out pretty nice.
Great. Look forward to it. And when will that be out? Do you have a August? Great. And Suzie?
The third and final book of the Shadow series is called Shadow Dancers, and it comes out probably the beginning of 2022. And then I have another book working on called Enigma. It is about the United States here in Akron, Ohio, at the Goodyear plant, right before Pearl Harbor. And a spy is in the plant. So it's going to be a period piece, a history piece.
A lot of research.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, I figure I've got it. I've already done about 2 months. I've probably got at least 4 more months of research before I can even start it. So lots of research on that.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we are well over time because y'all had such good readings. Again, thanks you everybody for attending and for joining us. Don't forget the flash sale is going on until 12:59 tonight. So go ahead and grab all these books, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you again soon. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Be well.
Bye-bye.